Afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. I am sitting here with another amazing guest for you today. I am sitting with Sheila Wenger. Sheila is an experienced educator, certified hypnotherapist, podcaster, and parent coach who is dedicated to empowering individuals and families mentally and emotionally through hypnosis in Vancouver, Washington. Sheila, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Oh, we're happy to have you here. We have a lot of ground to cover. I know that our our listeners are going to have a lot of questions as well because it is an interesting topic. Before we get into that, though,
hmm
we do like to have an icebreaker on the show, and the question for you today is: who has inspired you the most on your journey so?
It's a good question. I have a lot of candidates, but I think probably the person who's helped launch me more than anybody is Michael Singer, who wrote Untethered Soul. He made it really straightforward about how to truly achieve internal lasting happiness. And at one point in my life, I was not feeling that. And I desperately needed to find out if that were possible. And reading him and doing exactly what he said helped me achieve something I did not know was possible.
I love that. Actually, it's one of my favorite books. I like the anecdote with the two dogs. I always butcher it, but I love that two dog story. The only path to freedom is. Oh no, wait. I think I might be mixing up the chapters, but the only path to freedom was through pain. And then he talked about the thorn and then how you had to get the machine through the door, and it became this big thing.
Right. Yeah. It's
Or the
it's really empowering. He's an incredibly empowering person.
Yeah, I like that book. I like that. To anybody who hasn't read the book, I'm not, this isn't a plug. I'm just, I didn't bring it. I had no idea it was coming up, but go out, read the book. It's a decent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Just sliding in here, the easy one, right? How would you define procrastination, Sheila, and what does it mean to you personally?
I define procrastination as a form of self-sabotage because of a need to avoid a feeling that people don't want to feel. And I know that when I was first starting out as a parent coach, when I didn't have my other certifications, that I was doing that because at the time I was too afraid to feel rejection if it didn't work. So I wasn't doing the things because I was too afraid to risk rejection. So it's just easier to self reject. At least I know what's going to happen that way. But to risk something you really want can be very scary. And so, and plus, as a hypnotherapist, I know how the subconscious works. A lot of times it's completely outside of our realm of awareness, and something inside of us is stopping us. So that's my definition of it. And once I learned you know, how to use our consciousness in our service, that nobody taught us in school or even in university at all, it completely stopped. So there's my view of it.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I might be wrong,
Okay.
but we all know that there's no 100% cure for procrastination. Any 100% cure for procrastination. Everybody's different. Everyone's reason is different.
Yes.
But I would go on a limb and say that your sort of secret sauce has been hypnosis.
Yes, absolutely. It continues to blow my mind and prove itself to me. Recently, in the last month, I have had more and more situations and cases of issues I've never even heard of. And people ask me if I can solve that. And my answer now is, well, probably. I never know for sure if I can, if I've never done it before. But in the last month, there have been so many new ones that I was able to solve that it continues to blow my mind of how this subconscious operates. And it's something we all need to understand, because 95% of what we do is coming from the subconscious. So if we're not even dealing with it, procrastination is one of many problems that we're still dealing with until we've got that knowledge. One example is a I had a stutterer, never dealt with a stutterer before. He stuttered for 29 years, and after our session, he completely stopped stuttering for 2 weeks. So only for 2 weeks, it did return, and now we're going to have another session, and I have an inkling as to why it returned, and we're going to get to that in the next session. But for a 29-year issue to just stop is really something, and it was because I had a feeling there was something going on in the subconscious, so we got in there.
And when you're talking about the subconscious and you're talking about hypnotherapy, I know there's a lot of people that are weary of it. They don't trust it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about hypnosis?
The biggest misconception is that someone else is taking control of you. That's the biggest people who are nervous and afraid. Like, I don't want anyone, invading my operating system, right? And they think also that you're just going to be really in it because, the truth is they call it a hypnotic trance that you're in, but that word trance is so loaded that people think you're just in this strange state where someone's then able to control you. And it's simply not like that. When you're driving down the highway and you realize your exit's there and you don't know where you were for the last, 10 minutes, that's a state of hypnosis. And you're able to drive a car and you're able to hear when people are talking and think about what they're saying. It's not as woo-woo of a state that people think they're in. And so my clients are hearing everything I'm saying, and I'm choosing words that speak directly to what they are passionate about, what they care about, what matters to them. So then that subconscious absorbs what I'm saying because it's something they really truly desire. If I were to ever say something counter to what they were about, they would reject that.
It's really about, pulling off that mask, so to speak, right? Because we all have layers.
Mhm.
Would you say that it's kind of a prerequisite in terms of how effective or how quickly, hypnotherapy can work as to how authentically someone is living their life?
I would say that if someone is not living their life authentically, there's a reason that lives in their subconscious. And if they want that to change, then we have to get to what's going on in there, right? So often someone may not be living authentically at all, but they want a change because they're exhausted or they have so many effects of not being authentic. So then they want that to change. And when they come in here, then I have to find out what's the pattern that got laid down through life. So what happens to us is that with imperfect parenting and an imperfect society, with all of these conditions, we have to take them on because we have no choice as a child. We're not powerful as a child. And if our pattern at home is that, oh my gosh, there's violence in the home, I can't just be a kid. I have to watch for the violence and prevent it. So if there's some pattern like that, that becomes a microcosm of their belief about themselves in the world. They're no longer a whole person. They're now watching for bad things to happen to try to prevent them. So they have a belief that they had no choice but to believe that this is a place where bad things happen. And most people just let it happen, except for me. I have to not. So they're expecting that. And so that becomes the filter they filter reality through and becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when I can explain to them after, we have a good 45 minutes to an hour to talk about the pattern and they can see that I get it. And I can explain to them that this belief is creating all of the recurring feeling and experiences that you just keep feeling because you're expecting to see it and filtering out the other stuff. And then when we talk about that on a conscious level, they know it makes sense, but it doesn't change anything. The left brain can't figure that out. It's in the subconscious and it's in the body, and so you have to get to it there and heal it in there. And that is the most powerful. I mean, to me, it's the most, I did, on and off, I did 14 years of therapy, talk therapy. And I now know the difference, how it helped me understand the pattern, the triggers and stuff, and it helped me manage them, but it did not make the feeling go away. When you get into the subconscious with this, it goes away. So it's fast. In my professional opinion, it's very fast compared to traditional talk therapy.
Well, we also have to consider that, that kind of makes sense because if you spend, 7 years developing a pattern, then, if you're going at the same input at the same level, it would take 7 years to overwrite it. I know it's not a direct translation, but
Right.
does that
Yeah.
sound about right?
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. And even in traditional talk therapy, the these sessions that are effective, that really do make a big difference, are the ones where they have access to the feeling in the subconscious, in the body. And those are hard in talk therapy. They're hard to get to because someone's staring at you and you have to get to your most vulnerable feelings and you have to get those out with tears or writhing or, grimacing and all this stuff nobody wants to do while someone's staring at them. That is when the body releases some of it that lives in there. So if you are doing regular talk therapy, the most effective sessions are the ones where you go have a big old cry. That one did something because it released some of this stuff out of the body. All the ones where you're just talking about it, those are helping you mentally understand it. But that's helpful, but it's not taking it away.
And it's so true too. We do so many things unconscious the entire day. I mean, shower thoughts. I mean, that comes to mind really
Yeah.
fast. Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's like, I'll tell you a real story.
Do it.
I've been bald for probably close to, I don't know, like completely almost, oh, it's got to be over a decade anyway. And, I was still up until probably about a year ago, still shampooing.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, yeah, really, like really, yeah. No, no, seriously, I was. I'd lather up and everything, be like, and so I caught myself, you know, one day I was lost in space somewhere. I was thinking about a presentation or something, I think.
Uh-huh.
And then I came to and I was washing my hair. I was like, "What?"
Yes. Well, I've got one for you too. I became aware of a subconscious behavior. Most of the time I eat pretty healthfully. I like good healthy food most of the time. But there are occasions, and this one occasion I was like, "I need donuts and I need them now." And I'm like driving somewhere and I'm pulling into the grocery store to get donuts and I bought like 3 donuts and I'm stuffing my face and I'm like, "What's going on? Why am I doing this?" And then I realized I could talk myself back. It was this pattern from my childhood, and when I have to give everything away to everybody else, my family, my parents, my kids, my clients. When I don't leave any time for me, I feel like I did when I was young. Like there's nothing for me. I just have to protect everybody else. And then that's when I find myself stuffing my face to soothe the feeling. And I was like, oh, that makes complete sense. And I look back at other times I found myself doing that. And it was the same feeling. Once I knew that, then I knew what to deal with in there. Wild.
No, it is. And actually, that brings up a question actually, because people often ask me why I became a procrastination coach, and I tell them a story, and the story is from high school.
Hmm.
But as I was recounting it just that day, I remember, and as I was talking through it and thinking through it for like probably the thousandth time,
Hmm.
that it actually went back further to like the third grade.
Yeah.
And there was one specific incident that stood out in my head. So do you think it's always, I mean, is it always back to those formative years? It's never like before 5, or I'm sorry, after 5, I guess, or 6?
Not never. I've had some where it really did happen in the teen years or something, something really formative and impactful happened in the teen years, but most often it is in the formative years.
So when you're talking hypnotherapy then, is it, or hypnosis in general, because I hope I'm not quoted on this because I'm probably butchering it, but between the ages of 0 and 8, your brain waves are, I believe they said it was theta,
I believe so.
and then after that, then you start to come up. So in hypnosis, are you going down to theta? So does that mean that in theory you really aren't able to hypnotize children, or they can't go through hypnosis like that?
It's a great question. I don't work with children because that takes I don't even know. I think some people do work with children, so they have a method that somehow seems to work apparently. But I've not done that. I have made a couple of exceptions, but they're not young children. So I've had a couple of 11-year-olds that I've worked with. Normally, I work with adolescents and above, but it did work. This 11-year-old had a fear of high ceilings, and it's called altocellulophobia. I'd never heard of it. He feels in really high ceilinged arenas because he's an athlete that he's going to float up to the top. So he's in jujitsu and wrestling, and he's really good. But in an arena like that, he can't perform as well. So I did work on him, and it did work on him. But again, 11 is past 8. They are in a state of hypnosis in those years. They're downloading. They're downloading the culture of their home. They're downloading the messages that touch their heart harmfully and happily. They're downloading those get recorded. The things that hurt us and the things that light us up get downloaded during those years.
And if somebody's, I mean, this is another big one, especially with coaching and therapy, and
Yeah.
and can hypnosis sort of cut right to the chase? Like, even if someone says, "I don't know," Can it also get to that?
Yes, I'll tell you 2 ways that it can. If they don't know where here's the biggest way that it can. If they don't know where it comes from, they just know they've felt it their whole life or they've done something their whole life, then I will, after my induction, when they're in that nice relaxed state, I'll ask them to bring up the feeling they're tired of feeling. Now, here's what's fascinating. When they bring up that feeling, and I'll ask them, where is it in your body? Is it all over or is it concentrated somewhere? And they'll tell me. The subconscious is amazing. It reads that somatic signature. And then I'll say, well, we're going to see when else did you feel that way? And we're going to go younger and smaller. It's an age regression technique, and a memory will pop up that made them feel that way. And so many times it's not a memory that they thought would pop up or that they even remembered particularly well, except then it'll come up. And then what I'll do is I'll take that to the very earliest time they felt that feeling. And I've had people, this will blow your mind a little bit. I've had young people, they'll say they're 2. I've had some people say that they can't talk, they're in the crib. I've had someone be in the womb. And even recently I just had someone who hadn't taken on a body yet. So they can have things that are haunting them very early, or that they don't that they wouldn't expect to be the memory. And also you can use hypnosis for repressed memories, and I've done that as well. I've had a couple clients where I know something happened. I can tell based on how I was in certain situations, based on things family members said that I wasn't supposed to hear. I could, and we did find those repressed memories because they do live in the subconscious. And then while I'm talking about it, when we're there and they're re-experiencing that moment, what's fascinating is that the grown up in my chair, I'll ask them to look at the young self. And this is based in IFS theory, which on a mental level, it's a great model. But internal family systems is a great model. But this uses it in an experiential way. So the grown up will see the child, and I'll ask them, is there anything wrong with that child? Does that child deserve to feel what he's feeling? And that is when they will have these emotions, because they will have felt ever since they were that age that something's wrong with them because they can't get the love that they need, or they can't get their needs met, or whatever it is. And now they're looking at themselves and going, that was my kid. I would take him and love him and kiss him and make sure he had all of his needs met. So they realized there was nothing ever wrong with that child. And they're able to now know there is nothing wrong with them. It's just they were forced to feel that way because they couldn't handle what was happening. So that's what takes the feeling away. Whereas just talk therapy helps you understand that you feel this way because of what happened. But that mental exercise doesn't do anything to make you feel different inside, and this does.
No, that's really interesting too. Kind of makes sense because, 95% of what we do is subconscious anyway, right? There's the four
Yes.
levels of competency. So, there's unconscious incompetency, then there's unconscious competency. No, was it unconscious incompetency? Yeah. And then conscious, yeah. And then, no, wait, unconscious, no, conscious competence, unconscious competence, right?
Yes.
Um, and that's sort of the area where things can get missed, and we leave dogs in backs of cars and things, and all sorts of fun stuff that
Yeah.
happens like that.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in knowing, is there a difference when you're doing when you're doing hypnotherapy? Is there a difference between somebody who is in a trance and aware versus somebody who is sort of like normal? Do you find, because I mean that is there, you're more open, you're more, is it just more relaxed and open, or is there actually like some sort of permission given? How does that work?
Well, there are deeper levels. And when someone's coming to me at the first session, we're kind of at a level 1 because I basically need to convince them this works. They're going to be the least open, right? So I tell them, this is all on me. I have to prove it to you. You just relax. You'll hear my voice. I'll paint pictures with my words. Take those in. And then after you leave here, you'll come back in 2 weeks and I'll ask you what's different, and something will be. And so you have nothing to worry about. It's on me to do it. But there are deeper levels. So once someone trusts me, you know, they can then go into a deeper trance where it's not exactly sleep, but it's deeper. And you can tell there's lots of twitching. Like sometimes I'll talk to the cells of their body too. I'll talk to their physical systems. And when that's happening, you'll see movement happen, like something's going on in there and they're deep enough that it's really allowing it. But it does harken back to, if anyone's going to do hypnotherapy, they really have to tune into their own heart to feel the intent of that hypnotherapist. We can't control somebody, but when they can feel our intent in their hearts, and I ask my clients to do that because we're going to talk for a long time. They can feel that I need to understand and want to understand them. They can feel that I want to take that feeling away from them very badly because I've felt that feeling myself or something similar. And when you feel the intent and the passion that someone's got, you got to ask yourself, do I trust that they're coming from the right place? And if so, it's the best thing you can do is to do that. But if you have a weird feeling about a person, if you don't have a great vibe, you should go find somebody else. That they're not going to control you, but you just wouldn't want to put your if you don't feel trust towards them, you won't let yourself go all the way, and you shouldn't, so it won't be effective. It just won't be effective. So you got to find the right person for you and then feel their intent for you.
That brings up another interesting question.
Mhm.
I imagine you do sessions remotely as well as in person.
I do.
Is well, I would predict that, from on the one hand, doing it over like online might be more difficult, but on the other hand, we tend to trust people more that for whatever reason, grade
Mhm.
of the degree of separation, whatever.
Mhm.
What's been your experience with that? Is it more
Yeah,
effective in person?
yeah. So I'll say it this way: I have had astonishing results both ways. So not there's a negligible difference in the results. However, my personal preference is that I think I prefer working in person. The results are just nearly as good or just as good, but there's something about sharing the space. There's my energetic field and your energetic field, and we're now on the same page towards an outcome we both want. And I'm just a little woo woo enough to believe that that energetic, physical, energetic sharing of the space does something more. And so, but again, I've had clients all across the country that have had just as good of results. So it's working anyway, but there's something that feels extra powerful in the room. I would just have to say that. So if I have a couple of clients who drive a few hours to see me, and I'll just say, okay, for the next one we're going to do, we can be remote. But if we're going to do a big doozy of a thing, let's just give it every chance we have to work. And if you can drive here, we'll do it like that.
I like that. I was just curious because all the whole thing on there. Maybe we should get one of those questions out of the way. We talked about some of the risks associated with it, right?
Mhm.
I remember my wife was considering hypnotherapy at one point,
Mhm.
and she got talked out of it by something that I'm pretty sure was false.
Okay.
But again, it goes back to, what was the exact fear? The exact fear was that you might bring up something like if it's what was it? If it's a repressed memory, it's repressed for a reason.
Yeah. Great question. Yes. Yeah. And, I have a lot of clients too that say, I don't remember my childhood. And that always makes me go, ding, ding, ding. Something not good happened. It wasn't we do have some protective mechanisms. If we don't remember stuff, it's protecting us. So when it's the appropriate time to get to those is when somebody realizes it's affecting them and they're stuck because of it. And that happens at different times for different people, but there is a big natural shift at midlife. I would say that probably about 60% of my clients are midlifers. And so that would be a time where people are feeling stuck if there's something repressed. And if they want to get to it, it will likely get it out of their way. And they're old enough to now probably handle it. They've got things established. They know they can keep themselves safe, but they do have to be ready for it. Interestingly, if I'm doing age regression on somebody for an issue they want healed, the subconscious has been protective of the worst memories. I've had people who've suffered terrible abuse, but it won't bring us to the very worst of it. it'll bring us to an experience just that made them feel the same way, but it won't be the very worst. So even in hypnosis, there is a protective mechanism going on for what they can handle. I found that to be true. So, but I would, any good hypnotherapist, and I'll just say this, my sessions are 90 minutes to 2 hours. Any good hypnotherapist should be spending nearly a full therapy session with you first to understand A, what is the pattern that you want to eradicate? B, what are you ready for and not ready for? Anyone worth their salt needs to know that, because if you're not ready for something, then we just do what you are ready for. And then that will eventually take you to the bigger things, but you have to do it that way or it's just not okay. All good therapists know that. With hypnotherapists, same thing. They should be doing that and always checking with you. Now, this is the way that I see it. I tell them I have now the map of what I can do. I'm going to show you the map of what we're going to do to get you from here to there. And then you get to tell me, have I nailed it? Am I on it? Are you on board with me? And if they ever say no, then we don't do it that way. They are in the driver's seat. I'm just the one who shows them what I know is possible, and they get to go at their pace and always, or no.
I like that, and it brings up another question for me as well. What you're ready for and what you're not ready for, especially when it comes to procrastination. Like
Yeah.
what am I ready for versus not ready for? So is it is it similar in hypnosis? Let's say I go in because I say I want to quit smoking.
hmm
But I mean, if I'm not ready for that, then are like the same bridging techniques used with different things or to do smaller things, or how does
Well,
that work?
let's take your smoking example. Let's say you're ready to stop smoking. I can help with that. But what I'm going to really want to do is help you stop smoking forever and ever and have you not just pick up another replacement habit and then another and then another. So I know that the best way to do that is to get to when did you start smoking and why? There's something there. What feeling did you not want to feel that you wanted the cigarette to take away? Right. So with a client like that, I'll say, I can probably make you stop smoking today. Done that, but I'd like you to not add on another addictive behavior. Are you willing to explore some about where this started, how it started, and what feelings you might be avoiding? And if they say, nope, I just want you to do one session and make me stop smoking, then I'll do that. I've done that. And I had a guy stop chewing tobacco. After one session, he'd done it for 35 years. And I had another smoker who'd smoked for 40 years who he knew his life was going to not go on long if he didn't stop, and he stopped. So it's not that I can't do that, but I know that if I do the deeper stuff, it won't be replaced. So I'll ask, but they can say yes or no. Most of them are willing to probe a bit more and go into the origin of it. Does that answer your question?
No, no, no. It answers the question. It's interesting to me that we still have that sort of they're willing to go deeper rather than the standard response is normally, oh, take some pill to feel happy, or get some extra serotonin, or
I know that's an interesting point. Part of it I think is I'm on the West Coast and we're a little bit more deeper dive. There's a reason in here for everything kind of thing. I don't know. I think that's a good question though. There is, I mean, look at Ozempic and or people want to use that for losing weight rather than going to the origin of it. I don't know. I think there's maybe both things happening at the same time, the quick fix and also the deep dive.
no, it's interesting you said both there, and especially on like the cellular level of the body, right?
Yes. Yes.
Do you think do you think that there is this, and I mean, we know there's dissonance, but do you think that this is caused by, kind of our society where maybe we've cut off the subconscious kind of, I'm not going to say intentionally, but just the way that we've kind of come up in society that we just tended to ignore it so long it just decided to do its own thing anyway.
Your question, but I want you to ask it another way so I can make sure I know what you're asking.
So we know that up until the age of, I guess, 8, 12, somewhere in there, we have a bridge between the subconscious and the conscious, obviously. And at some point that closes off. Well, it doesn't close off, obviously,
It
but
just it doesn't communicate well.
yeah.
Or okay, so now what's your question? You're asking about how does that what's making that happen?
Yeah, so what makes that happen? Is it a defense mechanism, or is it that society that we just get it taught out of us?
That's a really loaded question. I mean, that's a very big question. So I do think that a lot of factors in society are separating us from ourselves, distracting us from our own interior. Now, it's my belief that we are made perfect. We have everything we need in here, and that we have a mechanism to protect us from what we can't handle. That's what happens in the subconscious. It's a loving mechanism to protect us from what we cannot handle. So, so that if something that we can't handle happens, now we've risen up and become a false self to become that which will prevent that from happening. It's protective. Now, there's something good that comes of this too. We get great survival skills. So I grew up in a certain amount of turmoil, certainly not the worst at all, but enough that it affected me. But that and the combination of my personality made me super determined, super intense in some ways that served me super well as a student and an athlete and all these things. But what happens is, so we get some benefit from that protector, but then they run out. But it's like on a piano, you've been typing those same two keys, and now those two keys are worn down and they don't work anymore. And then we get diminishing returns from what always served us. That often happens about midlife, 40s to 50s. You're like, gosh, everything I've always done, it's not working anymore. And I'm exhausted and I can't get myself to do it in the same way and all these things. That's because we're not supposed to be a partial self forever, right? We're supposed to round out and keep learning and growing. And yet this protective mechanism has now worn out. It is time for us to lean into perhaps, more of our right brain, system, more of our heart instead of our left brain. We're supposed to become whole. And when our tools stop working, our survival tools, they stop working. That's a signal that we need to do something. And that's when people often do feel stuck. And this, has a positive impact on helping them move into those new skills that their life didn't let them develop.
And actually, that raises another pretty interesting question because we're using this as a modality to, I guess, adjust, clear out feelings.
Yeah.
But could we also use hypnosis? I know that like you can't control anyone, but let's say that somebody really, really hates math.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get that information into that? Like not just the feeling, but to actually input that information in a faster way?
It's a good question. Probably. I've never worked on that particular thing, but if I were working on something like that where there's an aversion. Actually, I love this. This is like a great puzzle you just made me want to solve. I love this. If there is an aversion to math, there's likely an experience related to it that made the person feel stupid. Maybe they're not particularly great at math, but it was not handled well and it made them feel so inadequate that now they have a block on math. I can remove that and then we would see, is it easier? I mean, I had a writer who she was procrastinating on writing actually, and I did work on her, and she then entered a writing contest online and won the thing. First place. It was like 150 people. It wasn't 1,000 or anything, but she wrote a story and won the competition where she wasn't even writing before, right? So if there is a fear-based reason, an experience that was psychologically damaging related to math, then yes, definitely. But you raise the question, can someone like me make them better at math? Well, in that way, absolutely. And there's, the lens I look through is I can almost find a psychological component in almost everything I've ever dealt with. In a way, it would make them better at math. Is it, oh, well, let's talk about a related topic. So I have worked with several athletes. Here's one that relates to the math question. She had injured herself. She was a volleyball player and she was very good. She was getting recruited, but then she injured herself. She healed, she healed perfectly fine, but after the injury, she wasn't playing the same way. That's because in subconscious, she was afraid to be hurt. So she wasn't going all out like she was before. So with her and many other athletes, I will take them through the act of their sport. And I will have them seeing themselves doing it perfectly and feeling certain ways, feeling totally calm. And you won't believe this one, but I did this on my father-in-law. He was my first client. And we did this on golf, and he got a hole in one. After he left my office, he went to the golf course and golfed a hole in one. So in that way, I was showing him the oneness with the ball and how it was magnetic to that hole and how he was completely calm. And I mean, I talked them through the experience. So yeah, in some way I could have them see the numbers and how they feel so calm, and as if the numbers almost just reveal the answer. There are some things you can do that do seem to impact them to make it easier. I had a cross country runner want to shave off an exact time for her next race, 2 minutes off a 3-mile time. She got the exact time that I had her visualize in hypnosis. So, it's really something. It's really something.
No, it's definitely an interesting topic, and it's one that warrants a lot of investigation, especially when we get into like mind body connection, right? Talking to the cells, and I'd be interested to hear. I don't know if you've had any experiences, but
I have.
be interested to hear like telling the body to reposition itself, like a torn ligament or bruised something.
Well, I haven't done that, but I had let's see, physical things I've done. There are two that were fairly recent. One, he had a near death experience. He died. He didn't go to the afterlife or anything, but he was his heart stopped, and he has AFib. His wife sent him to me to stop drinking and lose weight so that he would help his heart, even though it's got AFib and it's going to have an issue. So he stopped drinking. He lost 25 pounds. But then after all that was done, I really did that deep psychological session, like the pattern from childhood that he had this just go, go, go mentality. And he remembers being woken up by his grandfather because his mom had to go to work and she took him to the grandfather's, and the grandfather would always wake him up 5, 6 years old. Like, why are you still sleeping? We got stuff to do. And he's been that way ever since. He's in his 60s. Anyway, he's like that ever since. Well, his heart finally just got tired of being that way, and theoretically at least, and stopped. Like, I'm tired of this, theoretically. I don't know, but I got to that psychological pattern and healed it with him in that process that I told you. And the next session, he came back and he had gone to the cardiologist and they had tested his heart and he had a normal sinus rhythm. He asked his cardiologist, does that happen? Someone with AFib can just spontaneously go back to a normal rhythm. And he goes, that's not common at all. So he was supposed to have an ablation. Now he's like, okay, doc, are we going to do that? And he goes, not if you stay like you are. Don't have anything to do. So we'll see if that continues, but that was a mind body one. And there's another one that I'm working on now who's got esophageal issues. They've checked his esophagus. He's had esophageal damage, but they don't find anything now. So it's like there's nothing there, but it's like hypersensitive from the trauma. And I was able to help that go away for like 7 to 10 days. It was calmed down. And then he just came back and it did return. But in his second session, I just did that, what I think the psychological part of it that's going on. And he's going to come back again and I'm going to see if he got even longer relief. So those are ones I've done. I know other people have, had success with bodily things too. Those are the two that I have really had a physical component for me.
Well, thank you for sharing. It definitely is fascinating. Jill, it's been a really great conversation. And we are coming up pretty close to the time.
Yeah, I've enjoyed.
So I just wanted to ask, is there anything that you feel that I should have asked but didn't ask, or anything you feel we should have covered but didn't cover today?
Yeah, I think when it comes to procrastination and our innate ability to do something about it, even if we're not going to hypnosis or something to take anything away, we do have a great deal of power with our own consciousness, and we have a very underused tool. We have been trained to rely on our analytical left brain for way too much. It's not supposed to do all the work, but we're kind of trained to do it that way. But it's not our most powerful tool for getting us to do things. Our most powerful tool for getting us to do things is our own imagination. So for example, if I wake up and I have a day that's going to be a doozy, I've got 5 clients in a row, no breaks. what I'll do is I will picture the end of that day, and I will be imagining it the way I will have wanted that day to be a perfect day. And I will be saying to myself, "Oh my gosh, I know I changed all of those lives and I still have vibrant energy for the rest of my day. I feel so amazing and I love the work that I'm doing and I'm picturing this one and that client all getting the results they're here for and now because I've used my imagination, I'm all fired up. I'm all alive. I'm like, I'm ready to go. And then I'll think, okay, I need to go for a run in the morning in order to feel that way at the end of the day. So that will get me out of bed and I'll run that day to have the sustainable energy for those 5 clients so that I can get to that ending. So when people think about the tasks they have to do, that's not inspiring. That's scary. I have to send a cover letter and they might reject me. That's scary. But when I imagine them, you know, getting the email for the interview or being in that office where I really want that job and how it's exactly going to be doing the thing I'm so good at, seeing myself doing it perfectly. I get so fired up physically, mentally, emotionally that I'm going to damn well send that letter. So that's one thing I would want your listener, your viewers to think about using. Don't just go straight to your to-do list and I gotta do this and I gotta do that and I gotta think it through. No, imagine first, and that will get you doing those things without thinking about them. You'll just get them done. Hope that's helpful.
What a powerful sort of tip to end the show on. Thank you so much for that, Sheila. It's been a real pleasure. Just before we go, what is the best way for our listeners to reach out and ask questions or
Yeah.
maybe learn more?
Well, they can email me directly. It's Sheila, Sheila, at shifthypnosis.org. Or they can find my website, shifthypnosis.org. And on there, you can sign up for an appointment if you want one. But if they want to ask me questions or interact with me, obviously, I love to talk about what I do and answer questions. So they can email me directly. They can also look up my podcast if they want to learn more about my own story. And that is Shift is Happening. It's on Apple and Spotify and everything. So those are all great ways.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. And to all our listeners, don't worry about grabbing a paper and pen. We are going to have those in the show notes. Be very easy for you to find. Once again, thank you so much for being on the show today, Sheila. And to all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation and inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.